She hid after losing her secret diary. The Alpha King found her and said, "I read everything." The wind howled through the tall, ancient trees surrounding the castle, carrying with it a scent of damp earth and old magic. Inside the cold stone walls, Mara pressed her back against the rough surface of a corridor, her heartbeat echoing in her ears like a drum. She had to be careful. Every step, every sound could betray her. Her hands shook as she clutched the empty space where her diary should have been. The leather-bound book, worn from years of secret scribbles and private thoughts, was gone. Gone. It had fallen into the wrong hands, hands she had feared most. Her mind raced. The diary was more than just pages of her thoughts. It contained secrets she had never shared with anyone. Dreams, fears, desires, everything she had dared to put down in writing. And now, someone knew them all. Mara pressed herself further into the shadows, listening. The corridors were empty. The servants, the guards, the usual bustling life of the castle, it was all quiet, too quiet. She hated the silence. It made the space feel larger, emptier, and more dangerous. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the panic that threatened to rise in her throat. I can't let him see," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. She had always feared the Alpha King, though she had never seen him up close. Stories of his ruthlessness and keen judgment spread like wildfire through the kingdom. Even the bravest knights spoke of him with respect and fear. And yet, part of her curiosity had always lingered. Who was he, really? And why did he seem so untouchable? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sound. Soft, deliberate steps echoed in the hallway. Someone was coming. Mara's pulse quickened. She ducked behind a tapestry, the fabric heavy against her skin, and tried to make herself as small as possible. The footsteps drew closer, steady and confident like the rhythm of someone who owned the castle itself. And then she saw him, the Alpha King. He moved with a grace that belied his size, his dark cloak trailing behind him. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the corridor until they fell on her hiding spot. Mara felt a chill run down her spine. His gaze was like ice, yet there was a strange warmth behind it that she could not understand. "I read everything," he said, his voice low, calm, and strangely soft. Mara froze. She could feel the words pierce through her, deeper than any blade could. She wanted to run, but her legs would not obey. Her diary, her private, secret world, was in his hands, and he knew everything. She felt naked, exposed, and yet strangely drawn to the calm certainty in his voice. You read it," she stammered, her own voice trembling. "Yes," he replied simply, stepping closer. "Every word. Every thought. Do you know how curious I was?" She swallowed hard. She should have felt fear, but instead, a strange mix of curiosity and dread swirled inside her. She had imagined this moment many times in her mind, though always with a different ending. Always with her running away, hiding safely. But now here he was, standing before her, and she could do nothing but stare. Why would you read it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Because," he said, his gaze unwavering, "it told me who you truly are." Mara's heart skipped a beat. No one had ever looked at her like that. Not her friends, not her family, not even the closest servants in the castle. They saw her duties, her manners, the mask she wore to survive in this world. But he saw through it all. "Who I am?" she asked, almost in disbelief. He nodded, and the corner of his lips curved in the faintest hint of a smile. "Yes, the person behind the mask, the one who fears, who hopes, who dreams." Mara felt a rush of emotions she could not name. Fear, yes, but also a strange sense of relief. Perhaps someone finally understood her. Perhaps someone could see the real her. But before she could respond, he continued. "And I think," he said softly, "that person is far braver than anyone knows." Her cheeks warmed. She could not tell if it was the words, his presence, or the fact that he had seen her thoughts and still did not judge her. Instead, he admired them. I didn't mean anyone to read it," she whispered. "It's just thoughts, things she trailed off, unable to put into words the vulnerability she felt. "I know," he interrupted gently. "And yet here we are. Secrets have a way of finding those who are meant to see them." Mara blinked. Meant to see them, could it be true? Could fate have brought her diary into his hands for a reason beyond fear and exposure? The Alpha King extended a hand, not to take her diary, but to help her step out from her hiding place. Hesitant, Mara accepted it, feeling a spark of something she could not name. Trust. Curiosity, perhaps even a seed of longing. "Come with me," he said. "You should not be here alone." She followed him silently through the corridors. Every step she took beside him felt like walking through a story she had once only dared to write in her diary. The walls seemed alive, whispering secrets of old magic and ancient power, as though the castle itself acknowledged the strange connection forming between them. They reached a quiet chamber, far from the watchful eyes of servants and guards. The room was dimly lit, shadows dancing across the stone walls. He gestured for her to sit. Mara perched on the edge of a carved wooden chair, hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Why me?" she finally asked, her voice barely audible. "Why not punish me? Why not hide what you know?" He leaned against the stone fireplace, arms crossed, his dark eyes fixed on hers. "Because punishing you would be pointless. Secrets are not sins. They are windows into the heart, and your heart is more remarkable than you think." Mara's chest tightened. The words were beautiful, almost unbearable in their honesty. She had spent years hiding her thoughts, never imagining someone could see them and feel admiration. She had feared judgment, yet here was someone, perhaps the most powerful man in the kingdom, treating her with an understanding that no one else had offered. For a moment, silence enveloped them. The only sounds were the distant howl of the wind and the faint crackle of the fireplace. Mara's thoughts raced. What did it mean that he had read everything? Could she trust him? Could she allow herself to feel something she had never dared to admit, even to herself? Then suddenly the Alpha King spoke again, his voice low and measured. "Your diary, it revealed more than you know. Not just your thoughts, but your courage, your heart, your potential." Mara blinked, unsure how to respond. Her courage, her potential. These were not things she thought about herself. She had always been cautious, careful, blending into the background. And yet he saw her differently. "Potential for?" she asked hesitantly. He smiled faintly, almost mysteriously. "For things you have not yet imagined. For choices that could change everything for you and for this kingdom." Her pulse quickened. She did not understand fully what he meant, but a part of her wanted to. A part of her wanted to trust him, to follow this strange path he was hinting at. But fear held her back. I don't know if I can," she admitted. "You will," he said simply, as if it were inevitable. "Courage is not the absence of fear, Mara. It is acting in spite of it. And you have more courage than you realize." Her name on his lips sent a shiver down her spine. How did he know it would feel like warmth, like recognition, like something she had never felt before? The moment stretched. Neither spoke for long seconds, each lost in their thoughts. Mara's mind whirled with the strange mixture of fear and fascination, admiration and trepidation. And all the while, the diary sat in the Alpha King's hand, a silent witness to the connection forming between them. Then, without warning, he closed the distance between them, placing the diary gently on the table. "It's yours," he said. "And yet, I think you might allow me to keep reading not the words but the truths behind them, the parts you don't write down." Mara's breath caught. Could she trust him with that? Could anyone see the parts of her that even she had not dared to reveal? And yet, something inside her longed too. Something inside her wanted him to understand her, to know her in a way no one ever had. Before she could answer, a sudden noise from outside the chamber, a guard perhaps or a servant, reminded her that the world beyond these walls would not pause for their connection. Mara felt a pang of worry. Secrets were dangerous. And yet, could some secrets be safe if shared with the right person? The Alpha King looked at her, his expression unreadable. "For now," he said quietly, "hide no longer. The world will find its way to you, but not before you learn what it means to be seen and to be understood. Mara nodded slowly, unsure if she fully grasped his meaning. But she knew this. Her life, her thoughts, and her heart had been exposed to someone unlike anyone she had ever known, and somehow she did not want to hide again. As he left the room, shadows lingering where his cloak had been, Mara sat alone with her diary, the strange warmth of his presence still lingering in the air. The fear remained, yes, but so did something new, a flicker of hope, curiosity, and the unspoken promise of a connection that could change everything. And somewhere deep within her, she realized, the Alpha King had read everything, but she might never be able to unsee him. The next morning, the castle was unusually quiet. A pale fog clung to the courtyard, curling around the stone pillars and creeping along the cobblestones. Mara walked carefully, clutching her diary to her chest. She could not stop thinking about the Alpha King, his eyes, his voice, the way he had read her deepest thoughts without judging her. Yet a part of her was still afraid. The diary had given him a glimpse of her soul. What if she had made a mistake in trusting him? What if he saw her differently now? Her steps faltered as she reached the training grounds. Soldiers sparred in the mist, their swords clashing with the echoing ring of metal. The sound, normally grounding, felt intrusive, a reminder of the world outside the shadows where secrets could be dangerous. Mara found a secluded bench beneath an old oak tree and sat down. She opened the diary, tracing the familiar lines of her own handwriting. Her thoughts seemed smaller now somehow compared to the weight of having someone else know them. She hesitated before writing. A shadow fell across the page. "You write beautifully," said a voice behind her, calm but commanding. Mara's breath caught. She looked up to see him, tall, powerful, and calm, standing just beyond the edge of the fog. The Alpha King. Even in the pale morning light, he seemed larger than life, like a figure from legend rather than reality. I wasn't expecting you," Mara stammered, closing the diary hastily. "I know," he said with a faint smile, "but you write like a person who wants to be heard. I wanted to see the truth behind the words." Mara's chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he saw her not as someone to control, but as someone worth understanding. Yet fear tugged at her mind. She had never allowed anyone to see so much of herself before. Why do you care about what I write?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling. He sat beside her on the bench, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, yet far enough that she could escape if needed. "Because," he said softly, "I know what it is to hide. I know what it feels like to be alone with thoughts that no one else can understand. And I see that same fire in you." Mara wanted to protest, to say that she was not brave, that she was just careful. But the words caught in her throat. She had spent her life pretending, hiding behind masks and rules, and here was someone seeing through all of them, seeing her. "You're different from anyone I've known," she whispered. "And you are different from anyone I've ever met," he replied, his dark eyes meeting hers. "Which is why I want to know you, not just your diary, not just the words you write, but the person behind them." For a moment, Mara felt as if the fog around them had lifted. In the stillness of the morning, she wanted to believe him. She wanted to step closer, to share her thoughts aloud for the first time with someone who might truly understand. Yet hesitation held her back. I'm not sure I can," she admitted. "You will," he said almost certainly. "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is moving forward despite it, and you have more courage than you think." Mara felt a strange warmth rise in her chest. His words were powerful but gentle. They were not a command, they were an invitation. And yet the shadow of doubt lingered. What if she made the wrong choice? What if trusting him led to more pain than safety? Before she could answer, a distant sound interrupted them. The clang of swords, a shout, the voice of a messenger running through the fog. Mara glanced toward the courtyard and saw a figure approaching quickly. The Alpha King stood immediately, his posture shifting from calm to alert in an instant. "Stay here," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. Mara nodded, her heart racing. She watched as he walked toward the approaching figure. Even from a distance, his presence seemed to command attention, the soldiers parting instinctively as he passed. When the messenger reached him, he knelt quickly and bowed. "Alpha King, there is news from the northern border," the young man said, breathless. "Reports of unrest and of strange sightings in the forests." The Alpha King's dark eyes narrowed. "Strange sightings?" he asked. "Yes, my lord," the messenger replied. "Creatures, shadows, people disappearing. The villagers say it is the work of a curse." Mara's curiosity piqued. Curses were common in the kingdom's legends, but she had never seen anything firsthand. And yet the Alpha King's calm acceptance suggested that this was more than mere superstition. "Show me," he said simply. The messenger bowed and ran ahead, and the Alpha King turned back to Mara. "Come," he said. "You will see that secrets and shadows are not always confined to words on paper." Mara hesitated. Part of her wanted to stay, to keep her diary close and her heart hidden. Yet another part, the part that had always been drawn to stories and mysteries, urged her forward. She followed him through the fog, her footsteps quiet against the cobblestones. As they reached the edge of the castle grounds, the fog thickened. Trees loomed like silent guardians, their branches twisting in strange patterns. Mara felt a shiver run down her spine. Something about the forest seemed alive, watching, waiting. The Alpha King stopped at the edge of the trees. "This is where the reports begin," he said, his voice low, "and where the truth often hides in plain sight." Mara looked around. The forest was dense, shadows shifting with every movement. She could hear whispers, faint and fleeting, as if the wind carried voices not entirely human. Her heartbeat quickened. "Are you afraid?" he asked softly, his hand brushing against hers. Mara froze. The touch was light, almost accidental, yet it sent warmth through her chest. "A little," she admitted. "Good," he said quietly, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. "Fear reminds us that we are alive, and alive we can choose to act, to discover, to grow." They entered the forest together, moving carefully among the twisted roots and fog-shrouded paths. Mara's eyes were wide, taking in the strange beauty of the place. The way the light fell in silver shafts, the way the fog swirled around them like living threads, the way the shadows seemed to stretch and move at the edges of her vision. And then she saw it. A figure barely visible through the mist darted between the trees. At first she thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow moving too quickly to identify. But the Alpha King's hand tightened slightly on hers, and she realized he had seen it too. "Stay close," he whispered. "Do not speak. Let me handle this." The figure stepped into a patch of light, revealing a glimpse of a strange mask and flowing garments that shimmered unnaturally in the fog. Mara's breath caught. There was something otherworldly about the presence, something that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. "It is as I feared," the Alpha King muttered, his eyes narrowing. "A messenger of a curse long forgotten." Mara swallowed hard. Her heart raced, a mixture of fear and awe. She had read about curses and ancient magic in her diary, but never imagined she would witness it firsthand. And yet, here it was, standing mere paces away, and the Alpha King faced it as if it were a familiar enemy. The masked figure raised a hand, and the fog seemed to respond, swirling faster, thicker, carrying whispers that sounded almost like voices speaking her name. Mara's pulse quickened. She could feel the tension in the air, the fragile line between fear and fascination. The Alpha King stepped forward, his presence commanding and unyielding. "You will not harm her," he said, his voice low but filled with authority. The figure paused, as if considering him, then slowly withdrew into the shadows, vanishing among the twisted trees. The whispers faded, leaving only the sound of the wind through the branches. Mara exhaled, her body trembling. What was that?" she whispered. "A reminder," the Alpha King said, turning to her with a calm intensity that made her heart flutter, that the world is full of secrets beyond our understanding, and that some truths are only revealed to those who are brave enough to seek them. Mara looked at him, a strange mix of fear and admiration in her eyes. She realized with a thrill she could not name that this was just the beginning. The diary, the secrets, the connection she shared with him, it was all part of something larger, something she had yet to comprehend. As they walked back toward the castle, the fog slowly lifting, Mara felt a new sense of purpose. Her heart still trembled with fear, but it also beat with anticipation. Secrets were dangerous, yes, but they also held power. And for the first time she felt ready to face them, not alone, but with the Alpha King by her side. He glanced at her, his eyes dark and unreadable, yet full of unspoken understanding. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "we will begin to unravel what has been hidden, and you will see that courage is the key to more than survival." Mara nodded, her grip on the diary tightening. She did not yet know what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. Her life, her secrets, and her heart were entwined with a destiny she could not yet see. And somewhere deep inside, she felt a flicker of something dangerous and thrilling: hope. The castle was quieter than usual that evening. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving long shadows to stretch across the ancient stone walls. Mara sat in her chamber, the diary open on her lap, tracing the familiar lines of her own handwriting. But her thoughts were not on the words themselves, they were on him, the Alpha King. She could still feel the brush of his hand in the forest, the weight of his gaze when he had confronted the strange, masked figure. Something about him made her heart beat faster, made the shadows of the castle feel smaller, less frightening. And yet, a part of her still trembled. She did not fully understand him or herself, but the pull she felt toward him was undeniable. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Mara!" His voice, low and calm, drifted through the door. She swallowed hard and stood. "Yes," she called, trying to sound steady. The door opened slowly, and he stepped inside, his dark cloak brushing the floor behind him. Even in the dim candlelight, his presence filled the room, commanding yet strangely gentle. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said, closing the door behind him. "But there are matters we must discuss, matters of shadows and secrets." Mara nodded, though her stomach twisted with nervous anticipation. She had spent all day thinking about the forest, the whispers, and the strange figure. And now he was here, and she realized that she wanted him to stay. He moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "Do you understand why I brought you into the forest today?" he asked. I think so," she replied hesitantly. "To show me the dangers beyond the castle." He shook his head slightly, a faint smile touching his lips. "Not just that. To show you that secrets have a life of their own. They do not remain hidden forever, and sometimes the truth seeks those who are ready to face it." Mara's pulse quickened. "And am I ready?" she whispered. His gaze softened. "Perhaps. Or perhaps you are learning what it means to be brave. Courage is not sudden. It grows like a flame fed by trust and choice. You have already shown me courage by trusting me." Mara felt a warmth in her chest, but it was mixed with fear. Trusting him had come naturally, yet it left her vulnerable in ways she did not fully understand. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Mara, do you know why I read your diary?" Her breath caught. "You already told me to understand me." "Yes," he said, "but more than that. To see your heart, to know your true self. Everyone hides something from the world. Everyone wears masks. But you are willing to let me see beyond yours." Mara looked down at the diary in her hands, the words she had written now seeming smaller, less significant. It was not the words themselves that mattered, it was that he had understood the heart behind them. A quiet tension filled the room. Neither of them spoke for a moment, yet both felt the unspoken connection, the invisible thread linking them. Mara's thoughts swirled with questions and emotions she had never dared to feel. Curiosity, fear, longing, and something else, something that made her pulse quicken, a desire to know him, not just the Alpha King, but the man behind the legend. "Come with me," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. She hesitated. "Where?" "Somewhere you can understand," he replied, holding out his hand. "A place of truth." Mara's heart raced, but something in his eyes gave her courage. She placed her hand in his, and together they walked through the castle corridors, past the flickering torches and heavy wooden doors, until they reached a narrow staircase that led to the highest tower. The wind whipped around them as they stepped onto the balcony. Below, the castle grounds were shrouded in mist, and beyond them the dark forest stretched endlessly, the shadows deep and mysterious. The moon hung low, casting silver light across the land. "This is my favorite place," he said quietly, standing beside her. "From here you can see everything, the castle, the forests, the lands that belong to our kingdom, and you can understand how small we are, yet how much power lies in our choices." Mara shivered, partly from the cold, partly from the intensity of being near him. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "And dangerous," he added softly, "just like secrets. Beauty and danger often travel together." She looked at him, feeling the weight of his gaze. Do you think I am ready to face danger?" He turned to her, his eyes dark and serious. "Perhaps, or perhaps you are already facing it in ways you do not yet realize. Courage is not the absence of fear, Mara. It is acting despite it." Her chest tightened. His words were simple, yet they carried a gravity that made her pulse quicken. She wanted to believe him, to step fully into this strange connection that had formed between them, yet a part of her remained cautious. "You are different," she whispered, almost to herself. "And so are you," he said, his voice barely above the wind. "Different from anyone I have ever met. And that difference, it draws me to you. It challenges me, teaches me, and makes me want to protect you in ways I cannot explain." Mara felt her cheeks warm. She did not fully understand what he meant, but the sincerity in his voice made her heart ache with longing. Suddenly, a rustling in the nearby forest caught her attention. She turned, but the shadows had already swallowed whatever had caused the movement. "The forest is restless tonight," the Alpha King said, noticing her gaze. "The shadows are never still, and neither are the secrets that live there. That is why I brought you here, to prepare you, to show you that danger is not always obvious, and that courage is not always simple." Mara nodded, gripping her diary tightly. She felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. The Alpha King was not just showing her the world, he was showing her herself, her strength, her courage, and her heart. "Do you ever feel alone?" she asked suddenly, her voice trembling. He looked at her, his expression unreadable, yet tinged with sadness. "Always," he admitted quietly. "Even kings are not free from loneliness, but sometimes we find someone who understands us, and that changes everything." Mara's breath caught. She did not know if she was ready for that kind of truth, but part of her longed for it. Part of her wanted to believe that she could be seen, fully, and still be accepted. The wind swirled around them, carrying whispers from the distant forest. Mara shivered, but she did not move away from him. Instead, she stepped slightly closer, drawn by the unspoken promise in his eyes. "Do you trust me?" he asked softly. She hesitated. Trust was not easy for her, not with anyone. But she looked into his eyes and saw something she had never seen before: honesty, strength, and a strange warmth that made her heart ache. I think I do," she whispered. He nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "Good. Trust is the first step to courage. And courage will take you farther than fear ever could." For a long moment they stood there in silence, the moonlight casting silver shadows across their faces. Mara's heart pounded, a mix of fear, longing, and excitement. She felt as if she were standing on the edge of something vast, something she could not fully understand, but something she wanted more than anything to explore. And then, as if sensing the moment, the wind shifted. Shadows moved in the forest below, and the whispers returned, louder this time, almost calling her name. "The shadows are restless," the Alpha King said, his voice calm but firm. And so are the secrets they carry. But remember this, courage and trust are stronger than fear. You must hold on to them, Mara, because what is coming will test both. Mara swallowed hard, feeling the truth of his words deep in her chest. She did not fully know what awaited her, but she knew that she could face it, not alone but with him. "Whatever comes," she said quietly, "I will try." He turned to her, his dark eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "More than try," he said, "you will succeed. And when the time comes, you will see that the strength you have hidden for so long is more powerful than any fear or shadow in this world." For a long moment, they stood side by side on the balcony, the wind whipping around them, the shadows of the forest moving like living things. Mara realized, with a mixture of awe and fear, that her life had changed in ways she could not yet understand. The diary, the secrets, the Alpha King, everything was entwined now, bound together by trust, courage, and something deeper, something she could not yet name. And somewhere in the depths of the forest, a whisper carried on the wind, faint but clear. "The dance has begun." Mara shivered, not entirely from the cold. She had no idea what that dance meant, but she knew it was only the beginning. The secrets, the danger, and the connection she shared with the Alpha King were far from over. She clutched her diary to her chest, feeling its weight, feeling the truth of her own courage. And as the moonlight painted silver streaks across the castle walls, she knew one thing with certainty. She would not hide again. Not from him, not from the shadows, not from herself. The dance of desire, trust, and secrets had begun, and Mara was ready to step fully into it, wherever it might lead. The castle was cloaked in a heavy fog, the kind that made even familiar corridors feel like a labyrinth. Mara walked beside the Alpha King, her diary safely tucked under her arm. The events of the past days weighed on her mind, his calm understanding, the forest encounter, and the strange whispers that had called her name. Yet a new feeling stirred inside her, determination. Fear was still there, but it was tempered by courage and trust, by the bond that had grown between her and the Alpha King. "The shadows are restless tonight," he said quietly, his dark eyes scanning the mist beyond the castle walls. "And the secrets we face are no longer only ours. Someone seeks to use them, to manipulate them." Mara's breath caught. She had felt it too, the subtle unease that had settled over the castle since the forest incident. "Do you think it's the masked figure again?" she asked, clutching her diary. "Perhaps," he said, "but it is not just one person. There are forces at work, ancient and powerful, that would use fear and secrecy to control this kingdom. And now they have your diary." Mara's heart sank. The thought that her private thoughts could be used as a weapon made her stomach twist. But she met his gaze, and in his eyes she saw resolve. The Alpha King did not flinch from danger, and now neither could she. "We have to stop them," he said, "together." She nodded, the weight of her fear replaced by a burning resolve. She had hidden for too long, feared too much, and now it was time to act. Together, they moved toward the chamber where the diary had first been discovered. The corridors were empty, but Mara could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy like the fog outside. As they entered the room, the temperature seemed to drop. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, twisting and curling in ways that made Mara's skin prickle. In the center of the room stood a figure, tall, cloaked, and masked, just as she had seen in the forest. The diary lay on a pedestal, its pages glowing faintly in the dim light. "You came," the figure said, voice echoing unnaturally in the chamber. "I wondered if you would." The Alpha King stepped forward, placing himself protectively between Mara and the intruder. "Leave," he commanded, his voice steady and powerful. "This diary is hers, and her secrets belong to no one but her." The figure laughed, a sound that made the shadows flicker. "Secrets are never just yours. They carry power, and power can be used or taken." Mara took a step forward, her hand brushing against the Alpha King's arm. "Stop," she said, her voice trembling but strong. "You have no right to use my thoughts. You cannot control me or my words." The masked figure paused as if surprised by her courage. Mara felt a surge of confidence. She had hidden for too long, now she would stand. "I am not afraid of you," she continued. "I will face whatever comes with him or without him. But I will not be a pawn in your game." The Alpha King's dark eyes met hers, and for a moment Mara saw something in his gaze, a mixture of pride, reassurance, and quiet admiration. "Good," he said softly. "Courage is the first step, and you have taken it." The masked figure moved suddenly, the shadows swirling around them like living smoke. But the Alpha King did not flinch. His hands glowed faintly with an energy that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of his heartbeat. Mara watched awestruck as he extended one hand toward the figure, the air around him shimmering with power. "You will not harm her," he said, voice low and commanding, "or face the consequences of defying me." For a moment the shadows seemed to hesitate, as if considering his words. Then, with a swirl of mist, the figure vanished, leaving only the diary behind. Mara stepped forward, picking it up. She felt a sense of relief, but also a strange exhilaration. The diary had been threatened, yes, but she had faced that danger and she had not backed down. The Alpha King stepped beside her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "You see," he said softly, "courage and truth are stronger than fear. Secrets are only dangerous if we let them control us." Mara looked up at him, her heart pounding. I understand now," she whispered. "It's not the diary that matters, it's what I do with it and who I choose to trust." He nodded, his dark eyes softening. "Exactly. And you chose wisely." For a moment they stood in silence, the weight of the night's events settling around them. Mara felt something shift inside her, a sense of strength, of clarity, and of connection. She had faced fear, seen the danger, and found that she was stronger than she had imagined. And she had not faced it alone. The Alpha King's gaze met hers, and in that look she felt something deeper than trust, something that went beyond words. It was understanding, acceptance, and the unspoken promise of a bond that could withstand any shadow, any secret, any danger. "You are different now," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Not just because of what you have faced, but because of what you have chosen. Courage, honesty, trust, these are your strengths." Mara felt a warmth rise in her chest, a mixture of pride and awe. I feel stronger," she admitted. "And not alone." The Alpha King smiled faintly, a rare softness touching his features. "You are never alone, Mara. Not when you are willing to be seen, and not when you are willing to stand." She looked down at the diary in her hands, realizing that it had been more than just a collection of thoughts. It had been a mirror, showing her her fears, her hopes, and her courage. And now she understood that the real power lay not in hiding secrets, but in facing them, and in choosing who to share them with. A distant bell tolled, marking the approach of dawn. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting golden light across the room. Mara felt a sense of renewal, as if the night's shadows had lifted, revealing a world full of possibilities. The Alpha King turned to her, his eyes catching the light. "The night is behind us," he said, "but the future, the choices you make, those are yours." Mara nodded, feeling a quiet determination settle over her. She had faced fear, confronted danger, and discovered strength she had never known. And she had done it with someone who saw her for who she truly was. "Thank you," she said softly, "for trusting me, for showing me." He stepped closer, his presence both comforting and intense. "No," he said, "thank you for your courage, for your honesty, and for letting me see the real you." Mara's heart raced. She had spent so long hiding, afraid of being seen, of being misunderstood. And now, standing here with the Alpha King by her side, she felt a freedom she had never known. The castle around them seemed to hold its breath, the shadows retreating as the sunlight grew stronger. Mara felt a sense of completion, of transformation. She was no longer just a girl with secrets. She was someone who had faced fear, embraced courage, and found a bond that could withstand anything. The Alpha King's hand brushed against hers, a gentle reminder of the connection that had grown between them. Mara looked into his eyes, seeing the depth of understanding, respect, and something more, an unspoken promise of care, protection, and partnership. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. Mara nodded, her grip on the diary firm but relaxed. "Yes, I am ready." He extended his hand, and together they walked to the balcony, overlooking the castle grounds. The mist had lifted, revealing the forest, the towers, and the lands that stretched beyond. The world seemed vast and full of possibilities, no longer shrouded in fear or uncertainty. "You have changed," he said quietly, "and in that change you have found strength, not just in yourself but in us, together." Mara felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of relief, hope, and longing. "Together," she echoed. The sun rose higher, bathing the castle in golden light. Mara felt the warmth on her face and in her heart. She had faced the shadows, the secrets, and the dangers, and had emerged stronger, braver, and more certain of herself. The Alpha King stood beside her, silent and steadfast. Mara knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The diary had shown her fears, yes, but it had also revealed courage, truth, and the power of trust. And now she was ready for whatever destiny awaited. As the morning breeze swept through the towers, Mara realized something profound. She had been seen, truly and completely, and she had not hidden. And in being seen, she had found strength, courage, and a bond that would endure beyond secrets, beyond fear, beyond the shadows. The Alpha King looked at her, his gaze steady and unwavering. "I didn't just read your diary," he said softly. "I have read your soul." Mara's chest tightened with emotion. She realized then that the journey of fear, trust, and courage had brought them both to this moment. A moment of understanding, acceptance, and transformation. And somewhere deep inside, Mara knew that her life, her heart, and her destiny had changed forever. The shadows of the past were behind them. The future stretched ahead, full of light, possibility, and a connection that no secret, curse, or danger could ever break. Together, they faced it, unafraid, unwavering, and ready for the next chapter of their story.